Okay, well, it is the strike of 11 o'clock, so we'll go ahead and get started. This is Bill Fulton with the Civic Canopy. Wanted to welcome everybody. We're really excited. It's our first webinar on Kumu, and I think our second webinar since the symposium. So it's great to be back in touch with all of you that were able to attend. And if you're joining us after and didn't attend the symposium, we certainly welcome you as well. We'll take a few minutes here just to stay in overview mode. We know sometimes people logging in, downloading software takes a few minutes, and we don't want anybody to miss out on the presentation. So I thought I'd just start by giving a little background on how the Civic Canopy came to know about Kumu and its great founder and creator, Jeff Moore. We were doing a project with the early childhood department in Hawaii, and who was very interested in mapping their community resources around early childhood, bringing everybody on the same page. And a consultant we were kind of working with on the content of early childhood, Jeff Moore, just happened to mention in a meeting that he had seen this same need for mapping different communities' assets and different resources, and was working on this software. And we'd long time since seen the need for that, and it turned out that this has been really a powerful tool in our work in community engagement, bringing people together, and it got a great response at the symposium. And so we're so lucky to have Jeff Moore joining us from California. You'll get to hear a lot from him throughout this presentation. In fact, Jeff, why don't I officially unmute you so you can say hello to folks.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here.
Jeff, I don't know if you're able to hear.
Hey, Bill, can you hear me?
We might be having some of those delicate audio difficulties. Well, I'm sure Jeff will be back online here with us in a moment. Let's see. Looks like you might have gotten a little disconnected. All right, well, we'll I'm sure be fixing that the voice and have Jeff here online with us in just a minute. Let's pull up our chat window. Just oh, Jeff's calling back in. He got disconnected. That's all. All right. Well, let's go ahead and dive in and get started. Thank you so much for joining. We expect between 30 and 40 people joining us today at some point, which is a great response. Already said a little bit about how we came to find Kumu, but for those that aren't, or just maybe meeting the Civic Canopy for the first time, I thought I'd introduce ourselves. We describe the Civic Canopy through our tagline of helping the many work as one for the good of all. And in pretty much everything we do, facilitating meetings, community organizing, policy work, it's always about helping connect the dots and bring people together. And the work of this webinar really follows on a big symposium we held in May, bringing people together that were doing kind of similar collaborative work or collective impact work. And there was a great interest in understanding this particular tool. I'll turn it now to Liz Riley and let her introduce herself, my colleague here at the Civic Canopy.
Hi, all. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm really excited to get started and work with everybody on Kumu. It's been a great asset for me and my work. I'm the Healthy Communities Coordinator here at Civic Canopy. We are also a Live Well community, and so I get to help that efforts in healthy eating and active living. And Kumu has been very instrumental for us going forward. So I'm very excited to share. So first and foremost, we'll go over the agenda for the next hour. We're going to start with Kumu one-on-one, just kind of a basic overview, and Jeff is going to help us with that since he is the creator and the expert, and we're really very lucky to have him on board. And then we can talk about what Kumu can do for you, show a couple different snazzy examples that Jeff has been working on, and then some real-life examples. Well, I guess they're all real-life examples, but some of the examples that we've been using here at Civic Canopy. And then we're going to walk through just the basics, how to add elements, uploading lists, different things that you can do with the map once you've got it put together, like clustering, and then ways to decorate it. It's been instrumental for me to walk through it with others, and so I think that it might be helpful for all of us to do that together. And then at the very end, we'll have a question and answer session.
Great. So it's a couple of webinar basics just to get going. You're all starting on mute, not meaning to silence you, but just oftentimes the background noise and cell phones can be distracting. So, but we will make sure to unmute you, and we'll ask you to unmute yourself when we get to the Q&A section, so we can have a good discussion and make this most useful for you as we can.
Okay, so like I said earlier, we're really lucky to have Jeff Moore on the line. He is the brilliant creator of Kumu, and he's going to give us a quick background, more information about how it got started, where it came from, and then he'll show us some really awesome examples of things that he's done with the mapping. So we're going to turn the screen over to Jeff.
And can you hear me okay?
Just want to make sure you're there.
Hey, Bill, can you hear me okay?
Jeff, do we have you live?
Yes, can you hear me? Hey, Bill, wondering if you guys can hear me. I'm wondering if you might be muted on your end in terms of your computer, or the speakers are down. Hey, Bill, can you hear me? Hey, Bill, can you hear me?
Yes, now. Thanks, Jeff.
Perfect. There we go. So can you see my screen?
Yes, we're all good. Thanks for the chats from folks.
Wonderful. Hey, so what I wanted to do is just start with a bit of background around kind of Kumu and where it came from. So the way to think about it is we've been around for probably about 3 years in the idea stage, and where we really kind of what brought us to build the tool in the first place was our involvement in the kind of social impact and philanthropy space. So I used to work for the founders of eBay in their family office, and one of the things we kept seeing was that it was really easy to actually spend a lot of money trying to improve some of these really tough social issues, and yet it was incredibly hard to make a lasting difference. And so as we're working through what some of those challenges were and why we weren't having that impact, this idea of relationships kept coming back up. And so our first step with Kumu was really around saying, how can we build a tool to help solve some of this challenge of mapping kind of who's who, how are they connected, who's most influential, really trying to get at the heart of understanding key influencers and how to work with them to do things like policy change. And from there, we actually started to kind of move and realize that it wasn't just about the people, but this whole idea of how do you map and understand systems, something like the early childhood space, which just has so many moving parts. How do you actually combine the mapping of the people with the mapping of those types of systems to really understand the situation and then be able to engage those people where it makes the most difference? And so what I'll walk through today is just a couple examples of those different types of maps. One of the things we feel that's unique about Kumu is that you can combine this human relationship view with this kind of broader conceptual view about how things are connected, and then just really work to try to combine those to do what you can to have the most effective intervention as possible. So I'll start. I love using this example that you see here on the screen, which is the PayPal Mafia, because it's a small enough example and it shows you some of the features of Kumu. If you're not familiar with the PayPal Mafia, essentially what it is it's the early employees of PayPal before they were acquired, who have since gone on to start just this amazing range of companies, whether it's YouTube, LinkedIn, Kiva, SpaceX. And so what you see here is the Kumu interface. The right side is the map, and again, it's really built to be kind of visually pleasing so that we can grab people's eye and attention. And then on the left side, you'll actually see what we call the overview or the profile. And so that's really where you put the narrative. In this case, you kind of have a longer title, and it almost looks a little bit more like a magazine article. One of the key kind of design points with Kumu is how do you bring the narrative together with the visual, so you can tap both people's kind of style of like, am I more engaged by a story, which is really true in much of the Hawaiian community, or is the visual what grabs me? And hopefully it's even both of those two in combination. So if you look at the map, you'll see there's a bunch of circles. So what we call the circles, we call those elements. So I'm going to click on one right now. I'll click on Reid Hoffman. And so you'll see it kind of grays out the rest of the map, and you can see the lines across. And so we call those connections and see what Reid is directly connected to. And then if you look on the left side, you'll notice that that sidebar has changed to now be specific to Reid Hoffman. And so the way to think about it is anything that you put in Kumu can actually have this sidebar where you can add additional information. And so think of this as you can have kind of that top level map, and then you can go deep with additional data, narrative, whatever kind of qualitative and quantitative data you want for each specific element and connection in the map. So if you look at the top, this is used a little bit more like a bio. So oftentimes when people are mapping networks of people, this is really used to give background on that person. A lot of times it's used to say, if it's something like an early childhood project, like why early childhood for you? What is that really emotional tie that brings you into the work that you're doing? And if you scroll down, what you see below here, this is a little bit more the data side of Kumu. And so this top part are what we call tags. So think of these as just like short pieces of information that you can save about anything in Kumu. And then as you go below, these are what we call attributes. And so it's really something like net worth. You can store a quantitative attribute, which is 4.4, or you could have something a little bit more general, like where they got their education, maybe where they call home, or the level of influence. And so the key part for us is how you can actually link this data that you're storing into the visualization of the map. And so if you look again here on the right side, Reid's pretty big, Elon Musk is even larger. And why that's happening is it's actually being sized by net worth. And so you can basically tell Kumu, hey, I want to use this data to change the size of those circles. And then you'll get this layout that looks differently based on the underlying values. This next example I'll show you, I just want to show it really quickly to highlight that you can do the same thing for connections as well. So this is a map that looks at kind of the Euro crisis that happened with Greece. And the way to think about the connections is that they're actually sized by the amount owed between two different countries. We found this to be super helpful, even looking at things like funding streams, so like which foundations are giving to which organizations and how much. And in this case, you can actually color those connections as well. So the red is meant to be that it's pretty worrisome in terms of that debt relationship, whereas something like the gray is meant to show that there's actually not a lot of worry that's there. Another fun example, and again, this is a public map, and what I'll do is I'll make sure to send the Civic Canopy team the links to these so you can dive in and explore on your own. But this was actually a map that a company did to show where everyone in their organization was brought in from and kind of what those existing relationships were. So if I zoom in on some of these parts, you'll see, I think this one's particularly funny. There's a gym bromance between these two, which is why Ollie was able to be brought into the firm. And there's just a lot of details in different categories, and so you can actually categorize the types of relationships to provide this much more kind of in-depth view visually to see, okay, the green is meant for people who have lived together before, whereas the orange is people who are friends, and some of the red are actually who's worked together before. And the last thing I wanted to show you before I turn it back over is just this idea of the systems mapping. If you're not familiar with it, it's a discipline about how to really understand all the causal connections and kind of what key levers may be to help shift a system. And so part of kind of Kumu's other functionality is being able to do these types of maps. And again, you can have the narrative on the left-hand side, and you can even include things like links within your map. One of the challenges with this big systems map, and this is still big enough to be overwhelming, is that you can easily get lost. And so if you want to, you can actually include links to the map. So if I hover here, this will actually zoom me into that part of the map, and then I can click and actually read more about that individual profile for that element. You'll see too some of the things you can do are, I'm clicking and holding here, and this essentially zooms into the map. And again, this is just done so that you can create this more robust map that explains the whole system, but when you need to, you can zoom into specific pieces. For example, we might want to zoom in on a particular loop. And so looping is just, again, another kind of technique that is used in systems mapping, and now we can just focus on this part of the map, which is talking about the balancing loop that is the Aloha culture. So that's just kind of a quick taste of the different types of maps that we have. I'll show you the link really quickly so that you can see where you can find some of these maps, kumu.io/explore, and that's where you can see some of them, just what everyone else is building on Kumu. Back to you, Bill.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Jeff. Again, we're so fortunate to have you here with us. And so hopefully we've kind of made clear the potential power of Kumu, and that you didn't need any convincing of that, otherwise you wouldn't be on the webinar. But we've also recognized that sometimes when you watch Jeff drive, it's like watching such a skilled technician that when you sit down to try it yourself, it's like, wait a minute, how did I do that fancy thing? So what Liz and I are going to do is try to walk through a very basic approach that you might experience as you sit down and try to create a network map. And by having, we consider ourselves just mere novices, maybe a page or two ahead on the learning curve. And hopefully that'll make you feel better about your steps as building these maps. And so just to kind of using the example from the symposium, again, those of you that were attended or have heard about it, a big feature of it was kind of the feeling of watching a room full of people also appear visually online, so that after that meeting, if you met someone and you said, you know, I just had this great conversation, oh, there's me, I shouldn't use myself, just had this great conversation with Anna Soler, I'd love to know more about her, there's a background you can find, or if we wanted to find ways to kind of cluster, you know, who are the folks in the room that are working on different different things that we're all interested in working on. How do we, you know, kind of organize the map to show the different relationships? And so those are the kind of purposes on a more concrete level that we're hoping that by the end of this next half hour or so, you can walk through and feel like you've got a pretty good handle on how to set up a map to start. And I'm going to turn it over to Liz to kind of walk us through some of the basic steps of setting up a map for the kind of practical terms that you've got.
Okay, so I originally decided to jump into Kumu to map the steering committee for the Health Action Network here in Northeast Denver. It's called the WISE Council, and you can see here, this is my map. It's not as beautiful and intricate as Jeff's maps, but it's definitely basic, and it's definitely doable for a beginner. The Health Action Network is in the middle, and then all of these elements are connected to the Health Action Network. It was really important for me to be able to visualize how we were stacking up against our governance guidelines. So we need to have 2/3 of our members be residents and 1/3 organizational partners. And so I was able to color code each member by whether they were an organizational partner or a resident partner, and that was very helpful. And then we have all of our other organizational partners on the periphery. And I can show you my Excel sheet that led to this map. Very basically, on the first page, these are all my elements. And the first column here are the labels, which is the name of each member of our WISE Council. The type will show me whether or not it's a resident member or an organizational partner or an organizational member. And then some of these elements have descriptions. And then I would be able to cluster them further by adding, these are the actual attributes that I added, the neighborhood or area of expertise. I can cluster them by figuring out where each person or organization is located. I can cluster them by figuring out what their area of expertise is. On the next screen here, I've got the connections. So every single member of the WISE Council is connected to the SHARE network. And then I went further and connected each member to whichever organization they were connected to down here. And then you can see these on the map. So each one of these lines is a connection. And that second sheet is what created these connections on the map. So that's my WISE Council map, and I would like to kind of walk through just really basic how to upload an Excel spreadsheet, how to do some clustering and some decorations, and then we can open it up for questions afterwards or get some other examples going. So first and foremost, I start here at the dashboard. This is just kind of like a home page, so to speak. And this is where you can create all your different projects and you have access to them. You go to create a new project, and we'll call this project demo. It's got a beautiful background screen to keep you calm while you're waiting. I love that picture. And Jeff was nice enough to upload a YouTube Getting Started video at the beginning of each project, so you can watch again afterwards if you need just some to refresh your memory about anything. So I'll exit out of there. And here in the corner, you can see this upload arrow. See it? It's like a gray cloud with an arrow, and that's how you upload. Once again, ever considerate Jeff put on just a quick warning to make sure that you're ready to upload or to import. And we are, so we're going to select a file from here. So here's our basic, very, very basic map. And this is just elements. And I zoomed out by using this negative minus icon here, so you can zoom in and zoom out using those buttons. Right now it's just elements, there's no connections. We wanted to keep it as basic as possible. But what's cool is we can cluster these. So we can cluster them by, cluster. This is the cluster button, and this is the way to kind of organize your map and see where the connections actually lie. And we can cluster them by, let's say, element type. Oh no, I wanted to cluster by neighborhood. And then I'll zoom in here to see the bedrock neighborhood. You can just hover over and grab onto it, move it around, and zoom in to see the bedrock neighborhood. And from here, it would be really awesome if I could see this on the map by actually decorating these particular elements. So I would like every person on this map to be a specific color and size. We'll go down here to this icon. It's like a paint drop to decorate. And here you have a couple of different options on what you would like to decorate. So you can decorate all the elements of a similar type. You can decorate all of the elements, or you can decorate just one individual element. I want to decorate all the people who are people. So I'll click here, person element type, and change the size to, I guess, twice as much. And then I can change the color. So now all my people are decorated. I can also go ahead and change the neighborhood to let's just decorate bedrock on its own. We'll make it really big to color. And there's our map. One thing that I realized is that you can always change this. So nothing is set in stone, which is really helpful for me. And I messed around with my colors quite a bit to make it look the way that I wanted to. But that was a good thing for me to not feel so nervous, to just play around with it, because we can always make changes as the time goes on. Oh, one thing I did want to show, actually, when you're uploading your Excel spreadsheet, this is my Wise Council spreadsheet again. You want to make sure that it's an XLSX or a CSV file. So in regular Excel, that means that it's an Excel workbook as opposed to the Excel 97-2003 workbook. If you try to upload one of these, you're most likely going to get an error message. So save it as an Excel workbook or an SSV, or CSV, excuse me. Let's see if I covered everything. One final feature that was really instrumental for me was the embed feature. And I was going to embed my other map, but we can just do it here. So right over here on the left, or the right of your screen, there's a little arrow. That's the share feature. And this is a way that you can share your map once you've got it completed with others, so they don't have to log into Kumu to see it every single time. So you click on that, and then you click on these two arrows, which is the embed feature, and I'll open it up to create the embed. And then you've got this long code that you can copy and paste into your site or wherever you'd like to put it to make the map accessible for everyone. Is there anything else that I was supposed to cover?
I think those are most of it.
Great.
So we know that it's very difficult to kind of learn this without actual hands-on experience, and so we hope that obviously after this webinar you'll go back and immediately try to upload and start. We encourage you to start small and simple and not try to do everything at once and just get the feel of it. But one of our first kind of and most eager learners after the seminar was Kim Desmond, who you met earlier in the webinar, and I think within a day or two said, I've got a bunch of groups I want to work with, and just wanted to kind of ask her to share a little bit about what it was like kind of going back and seeing how powerful it can be, and then realizing we all kind of start with beginner steps in it, but some lesson learned from Kim's experience, and then we'll turn over to question and answers and see what else we can what other questions we have from the audience and help customize the experience for you. So Kim, maybe talk about a little bit about what the needs were that you were looking for and what the experience of building a map was like.
Yeah, we were definitely eager, as Bill stated. Me and one of my colleagues, Emily Sumner, who's also on this call, we immediately went back to the office and said, "Oh my gosh, we want to use this, and how do we use it?" So we kind of sat down and played around with the mapping piece. So I think the benefit to starting was we emailed Jeff. Like we were really not sure of how to start our mapping, and we had some follow-up questions, and Jeff was very responsive. We really didn't think he himself would actually call us and talk to us, but he did. And we actually did a webinar with him where we were able to get some basic questions answered to start our mapping process. So that was really beneficial for first-time users. And we kind of did the same thing that Liz did, is we created a spreadsheet, and for our agency, we have 8 different Denver offices, and each office has a different demographic they work with. So we really wanted to map some skills, expertise in projects. So we started out with using the Excel spreadsheet to kind of organize our thoughts. So I would say that we did that after the fact, after we played with it, but as a new user, I would say take that advice, use the Excel spreadsheet first to capture what you want to say, because that allows you to really understand how the visuals appear when you upload the map. So we did the spreadsheet, and then we also started to play around in it, and then we started to color code some of our elements as well. So we are now on the novice state of this mapping system, and we're looking forward to maximizing our connections and our attributes.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Well, it was nice to see the kind of immediate impact that you guys were able to make. Let's turn it over now just to take some questions from the audience here and the members on the chat. You've got the power to unmute yourself, and again, just a reminder, if you're in a noisy area or you're on a cell phone, just be mindful of that it's hard to hear when you do that, so you might want to remute quickly after you pose your question. But let's try to take some questions from the group. What's of interest? What else can we show you? And what would you like to ask Jeff while we've got him as well?
Hi, this is Emily Sumner from Human Rights and Community Partnership. And like Kim said, we've been really excited to learn a little bit about this. And I just had a question about uploading the spreadsheets. When there's a change that you want to make on the spreadsheet and then you want to re-upload the spreadsheet, does it always, how does it capture those changes? We've seen sometimes that it might duplicate an element or not remove an element if we remove them from a spreadsheet. And I don't know if we were doing something wrong or if there's a better way to do that.
Great. I'm going to turn that to Jeff, and I'm going to mute on our end so we're not getting an echo. Jeff, that sounds like one I'll let you field here.
Sounds good. So the way to think about how the import works is it's meant to be kind of an incremental add. So the way to think about it would be, in this example, the state or the Health Action Network. If you were to take that file and say maybe add another column that was a phone number and add some add the phone numbers there, it's going to get added onto that map. But if you came into that spreadsheet and actually removed someone's detail or just kind of like took away one of the tags, it's not going to delete it from it. The only time that it'll actually replace the content is when you have something like a description. So say for Lisa Calderon on this map, say she has a bio. Since Kumu looks at the description and says, hey, there's only one value here, if you're changing that value, we're going to upload the latest value. But if you're actually trying to say, like, I'm gonna take this map and there's 5 people that have been removed from the map, so I'm just going to import and then take those 5 people off, like, we're not going to make the assumption that you wanted to delete them. You actually want to delete them from within Kumu and then do whatever imports you need. The only other way to think about it is sometimes what we have people do is they get to this point and then they want to make edits, but they're a little bit more comfortable editing in Excel. And so if you want to, that share button also has a way to actually export back to an Excel workbook. And so what some people we see do is they actually kind of delete all the content in their map, or they export it and then delete the content and then upload a fresh import, and then again, it treats it like it's fully new. There's nothing there that's going to stick around. It's whatever you have in the spreadsheet will get imported.
Oh, that's really helpful. Thank you.
And I think, so there's 2 other questions I see here right now, and I can just take those, Bill, right now, because I think they're, again, related to me answering them. From Tara, the cost using the Kumu platform, there's 2 different ways to think about that. One is there is you either have public projects or private projects. Public projects mean that anyone can view it. You still get to control who can edit the map, but anyone can stumble upon it, visit that link. And so public projects are always free of charge, and they're meant to be a fully featured account. So you have everything that anyone would in a paid account. And our goal there is really to build a community around people who are doing these types of maps, whether it's network maps or systems maps, almost like a Wikipedia of these types of content. And then if it's a private project, meaning you want to control who can view it, then that's $29 a month per project. And it's built so that it's not, there's no collaboration tax, which means it doesn't matter how many people you invite in. It's a flat $29 per month, even whether you had 1 person in your project or 1,000 people in your project. And then it looks like Aaron, we have a question from Aaron as well about the embed. So for that one, basically the way to think about how the embeds work, it's a view-only embed, but it's interactive. So just like how we're walking through and clicking on things in this presentation, you can actually do that same thing, and it just sits within a box on your own map. But yeah, you can still click, you can read the profiles as they come up. You can't do any editing, but it's still fully interactive.
Great, thanks, Jeff, and thanks for the posing questions. What else?
No, pass it back to you.
Okay, great. Let's see if there's other questions that folks have. Just looking down the list of attendees, see if anyone's unmuted. While you think of them, I just wanted to go back to our symposium map and just to kind of share again some of the ways we've found the functionality to be useful. That cluster function that we kind of mentioned earlier I think is one of the frequent needs that we find in community networks. Is I'm really interested in finding people that are interested in the things that I'm interested in. And so Liz already walked you through this, but this little symbol down here around cluster brings up this screen, and these are those columns that you're going to upload in your Excel file. So I think Kim's point was right on. Be thinking about the ways that you want to begin to make connections and have people organized by geography, by issue area, by culture, by language, by organization, whatever those might be. And at the symposium, we had folks organized by their collective impact initiative. And so you can quickly see in a room full of folks those people that are working on the same thing. And it allows you to visualize. Jeff went over this very quickly when he was doing the demo, but a nice feature, if you've got a lot of mess in your map here, is just to hone in on one of them, highlight it, and it will zoom in automatically, and it does a nice job of kind of focusing it for you. So the Colorado 9 to 25 initiative, I can scroll over folks that are all involved in this, see their profile, and quickly get a sense in a room or in a network of who's doing what, who's connected to who. And then I often panic, oh no, where's my big map? You just click on the background, hold it, and you'll go back to your regular map. So thinking intentionally ahead of time about the ways you'd want to cluster people and find out amongst those connections is a good way to look at it. Looks like there was another question that came in, Jeff, about is clustering the primary analytic tool. I'll take a first swipe at that. In terms of clustering, we found that the second kind of analytic tools Liz showed you and Jeff did, just even those color coding of elements, who's a resident member, who's an organizational partner, quickly allows you to see your makeup of participants in a given network. The color of those connections, are those work-based, are those friendship-based, allows you to visualize it. The size of the line, the decoration between, what's the level of influence between those. Those are at least some of the quick visual analytic tools that we've been kind of excited about. And let me turn it to you, Jeff, to see if there's other ones you want to speak to.
Sounds good. Yes, so the way to think about it, what Bill mentioned, those are the primary ones that are there right now. What we're planning to build in, if you're familiar with these types of networks, is there's a discipline called social network analysis. And so that has some measures. One popular one is called degree, which is this idea of how many different people are you connected to. And so there's that. There's some centrality measures which look a little bit more around kind of, are you on the highest number of shortest paths, meaning you're kind of a connector in the network. And so some of that's coming down the pipeline in the kind of the next months. Those will then, once you run those metrics, you can actually use some of those scales, and whether it's a color scale or a size scale, to then, with something like the Civic Canopy map, actually say, okay, what are those connections, and then show me who's most central, and actually have that circle change size. So some of those will be in the future. The only other piece would be, we've had some interesting demand for this idea of looking, when people store some of these attributes like level of influence or level of support, a lot of times people are using these maps around key issue areas and trying to understand like who are our supporters, who are kind of against what we're trying to do, and what relationships are there between them to maybe have one of your key supporters push one of your key opponents to kind of move towards the middle. And so what the idea there is this idea of how do you actually allow people to move the elements on a map on an XY axis. So like upper right could be very influential and very supportive, and then an upper left could be very influential and yet not supportive at all. And so just some of those are the things that are coming down the line. But as people get involved and start working within Kumu, one of the things is we're still very much kind of in active development. And so as you have ideas about what would be useful and helpful, please send us an email.
Great, thanks, Jeff. And great use of the chat tool as a way to pose questions. Thanks to those of you online. You can also unmute yourself and just join us in the discussion.
Jeff, can you show us an example of decorating the actual connection? Because we kind of ran into a roadblock there, trying to make the line size bigger, different colors. Can you give us an example of that?
For sure. Yeah, so one of them, we can use this overview of the Euro crisis map to start out. So let me zoom in. And so the way to think about this one is there's two different ways that people are actually. Oh, and Bill, can you guys mute really quick? There's two different ways to think about how the connections can work. So you can have the color or you can have the scale. And so what I'll do, I'm actually going to switch to a new perspective just so you guys can see exactly what's going on here and how we build this out. So let me sign in really quick. So what we can do, so the way to think about how the decorations work, they're all grouped in something called a perspective. And so sometimes you just only have one view of your map, and that's completely fine. The reason why we allow people to have multiple ones, though, is like, so say in this example, you're wanting to just highlight those that have high risk, and you don't want to worry about the other colors. Or maybe you're just focusing on the resident mixture, like in the previous example. So you can actually have multiple perspectives. So if I switch to this blank view, this is kind of what it looks like in Kumu before you do anything. So it's a very simple map. Again, this gives you the relationship view, but to take that next step and make it a little bit more interesting, you actually start doing the decorations. So in this case, we can click on one of the connections, and you'll see in this example, we have two different attributes that are saved here. One is the amount owed, and so there's a numerical value, and then one is the worrisome level. So for something, let's start with the amount owed. Say we're really interested in making sure that the connections get scaled. Another example instead of amount owed could be like level of influence 1 to 5, right? You might have a numerical value there which you'd scale with. So I'm clicked on the connection, and then I'll come down here into the toolbar, and I'll click this. What looks kind of like an ink drop. I'll click that. That's the decorate button. What I'll do here is I'm actually going to change this because I want all of the connections on the map to be decorated this way. So I've used this drop down to go up to that top value. And then I choose change size. And then you have two options. There's more of this fixed width approach, or we can say we want to do a scale. So I'll click scale. And then I pick an attribute, and give me 1 sec. So this is one of the things you might run into. If you don't have, and our import now will automatically detect numbers for the most part, but if you get into here and you realize, hey, like I have a numeric attribute, but it's not finding anything here, what's going on is there's a setting. The way to think about each of these attributes is they have some settings that you can apply, including a type, kind of a limit. You can hide them from kind of public viewing. And so in this case, we just need to come back and change this to be a number, so that Kumu knows we want to allow people to do a scale based on that. So I'll go through the same step again where we click decorate, do decorate all, and then when we click scale, now I have amount owed there to take advantage of. And so maybe we want this to be, essentially what you're doing with these two values, it's always going to be a linear scale, but you're picking what the lowest value gets. So we could keep this at 1x and what the highest value gets. So maybe we want this to be 7x. And that just means 7 times whatever that width is that you have set. And the last option you have down here is to actually have something in the legend. So we could say scaled by amount owed. And when I click save, that's going to change the map. And so right off the bat, you'll see, interesting, like this wasn't as compelling as the other map. And the reason why is because we haven't done nearly as big of a scale. So here from United States to China, you can see it's slightly bigger than everything else, but it's not really that dramatic. And so as Liz mentioned, you can actually come back in and change the decorations if you want to. So by default, you'll have this map page. In the upper right corner, you can click perspective, and that'll take you to the different decorations that are listed. And then if you hover over any decoration and click the pencil button, it lets you get back into that same screen. And so here we could say, guess what, we want to make this really big, and we actually want to make the minimum size a bit bigger. So if I click save, now you're starting to get back a little bit closer to that picture that we had before. And then in terms of the more qualitative side, so we have the worrisome attribute value here. If I click edit, you'll see there's no, low, medium, and high. And so what you need to do is essentially create a decoration for each of those. So if we walk through a similar process, I could say, I want to decorate, in this case, we're going to say similar connections that have worrisome level high. So I'll click on that. We can change the color, and maybe we want it to really jump. So we're going to use a bright red. And at the bottom, we can say, high, worrisome, and click save. And now anything that has that value, you'll see we can click here, is actually turned red. And so you could imagine how you kind of walk through that. But hopefully that is enough guidance. And Bill, I'll push it back to you guys.
Great. Thanks so much, Jeff. On the fly feedback. So we got a question while we were answering that one about, we kind of showed you the snazzy Civic Canopy Symposium map, and someone was asking, well, what's the Excel sheet look like behind that? Very different than our Barney Rubble example, a little bit more complicated, but still very within reach. And so you can kind of see there that kind of background work that went into that is a lot of this was a Google Doc spreadsheet that we had everybody fill out the background information, and then created categories of what's your focus area, what's your initiative. So it's not that different than the one we showed you before, just thinking intentionally about how you, what information you want to gather from people, and how you want to display that. So nothing radically different, just a lot more information in there. And then if clicking over to the symposium map itself, just to show you what that ends up looking like, all of those fields, if we click on one person here, you can see how each of their responses, so Jackie answered all of those questions on a survey. We dropped it into the Excel sheet and uploaded it in here, and those are all her responses basically. So if you're, would recommend if you're on the verge of starting a map like this, let's say you've got a network where you just don't know this background information, we used Google Forms, simple little survey tool, ask everybody to kind of fill in their information. It comes back to you basically in an Excel form, and you can just change those headers, make sure that first column is the label header for the person's name. We ended up having to collapse those first and last names together, so recommend you ask people their first and last name as one feature. But basically, everything else we just walked you through, you can do a really robust clustering possibilities if you get those categories right. So hopefully that answered that question. Let's see if there's any other questions coming in, or folks want to join in the discussion.
You know, one last thing that kind of stood out for me is when you're thinking about the categories that you'd like to organize your map by. So if we go back to this, the symposium spreadsheet, so each one of these become our attributes on the map, like Bill was just saying. You know, we think of them as categories or ways to organize our information, and Kumu calls it attributes. So that was something that took a while for me to like get right in my brain. But yeah, so these become our attributes. So the headings here, after you do, you know, first name, last name will collapse down into label. If you want to do any sort of element type, then everything else after that, well, and then sometimes there's a description, but everything else after that would become the attributes on the map.
Great. What else can we answer for you? And if there are no other questions, we certainly don't need to keep you longer, but didn't want to cut you off if you had other questions. Practicing a little bit of wait time. Good classroom management. All right. Well, we will take that as a chance to kind of wrap up with our final closing words here. And really just to make the offer again to have you reach out to us. You know, part of our mission with the Civic Canopy is to really be crazy enough to go out and find tools and experiment with them, break them, try them out to make sure they're worth using. And we've had great response from Kumu. We've had great response from Padlet, some of the other tools, and we're continuing to build out our own online platform called the Civic Network, which is a really robust tool to help identify community resources, who's doing what where, being able to share data about what of those resources is effective and how are we moving the needle on the outcomes we care about. So we'll keep providing these opportunities, and are just grateful for your participation today. You've got our contact information on email, there on your screen, and don't hesitate to reach out with other further questions. And just want to turn it back over to you and thank you again so much, Jeff. If there's anything else you wanted to add in closing here.
No, it's been a pleasure to be here with the group, and the only other thing I'd share would be, I'll type it into the chat right now, but this whole, there's a whole help site that's available called at help.kumu.io, and so the way to think about that, that has some detailed guides. If you're the type that wants to hop in and try like messing around, see what works, what doesn't work, as you get stuck, that's a good first place to go to for some intro videos, some kind of detailed step-by-step. If you get stuck and you can't find anything there, or you're getting frustrated, just send me an email. Don't worry about bothering us. It's actually great feedback for us to learn about what's still missing from our help guides. So someone asked to repeat the site address. It's help.kumu.io, and Bill's typing it in right now. So help.kumu.io.
Okay, well, thanks so much for participating, and we hope to stay in touch and connect with each other on Kumu and in many other ways going forward. Thanks for joining our webinar today. Take care.